Hello and welcome to episode 126 of MMO Weekly, presented as always by Chitty's Cheesesteaks. I'm your host, Sal Manzo, joined once again by Matthias Altman, Kirasaki, and Chris Bello. Fellas, feels like for the first time all offseason, we have something good to talk about with the Mets. The Mets have a bat, Bo Bichette, taking his talents, coming from north of the border down into Queens, a 3-year, $126 million deal. Mets get their impact bat after missing out on Kyle Tucker. They transition to Bichette, who reportedly is going to be playing third base, and they have that bat in the middle of the lineup to hit behind Soto, drive in runs, a good situational hitter, good clubhouse guy from all accounts. I want to get you guys' thoughts on this. So, Matthias, why don't you lead us off here?
Yeah, I did not have this on my radar at all. After they lost out on Tucker last night, I was just like, all right, this is going to be the offseason. I'm not expecting much more than a couple depth signings or depth trades, but this is a big time get for the lineup. It gives them some much needed length in that lineup. I mean, he's coming off the best offensive season of his career by WRC plus at 134. And that was coming off a dreadful and injury-riddled 2024 season. And he batted 381 with runners in scoring position. That is big time. That was a big point with the Mets last year, is that they struggled a lot at different points in the season, getting those runners in with less than 2 out, just coming up with the men on base and not getting the runs in. My one question is playing third base. He's never done that before, but he has played shortstop, albeit he wasn't great at shortstop, but I think he can work on being a solid third baseman. He doesn't need to be a Gold Glover, but I know that there are a couple opt-outs in here, but the Mets needed to do something to address this lineup with or without Kyle Tucker. It was kind of lacking some depth, in my opinion, but Bichette, if he can play third or if he can DH, he can play some second. I think whatever it is, it adds a nice right-handed bat to a lefty-heavy lineup. Plus, he's reunited with his former double play partner, Marcus Semien. So overall, I think this is a solid move for the Mets and can't really complain. Plus, they stole him away from the Phillies. That's always big. Stole a big bat away from a division rival.
Yeah, I personally think it's a great signing for the Mets. Kind of like Matthias was talking about, and I think the most important piece of this is the Mets really needed a right-handed bat. And this was even before Kyle Tucker signed. Mm-hmm. You go up and down the lineup, and outside of the switch hitters, they didn't have that right-handed thump ever since losing Pete Alonso to the Orioles. So hopefully they get a healthy Bo Bichette. Hopefully he comes back and he can get to that 20 home run threshold. Somebody who also, we don't know if we'll see this ever again from him, but he used to steal 20 bags a year too, which fits into this Mets lineup and Mets philosophy as well. So Bo Bichette, I just think, is a great add overall for the Mets. And specifically as well, you take it away from the Philadelphia Phillies, as Matthias said, and you kind of leave them yearning and wanting another infield and right-handed bat. So it's kind of a win-win in that regard.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And the Mets had a pivot after losing out on Tucker, right? What a difference 24 hours makes. Just last night we were talking about when that news dropped, having to do a show tonight talking about how the Mets missed out again on a big free agent and, still have all these holes to fill. Reported, obviously, the Mets were about $20 million short on the Tucker deal. The difference being the Mets seem to have offered more on their signing bonus. And also no deferred money. It was all up front. Dodgers are deferred. But Tucker wanted to go and hit 5th or 6th in a lineup that, he's going to make $60 million a year and no one's really going to notice. So that's what he did. And the Mets had a pivot, right? I mean, we're talking about Bichette here. I think we have to state the obvious. We know he's got knee problems. He did have the, biggest weighted WRC of his career last year. But I believe it was the last month or so of the season, he missed completely because of that knee. Obviously had a great postseason. He's a great clutch situational hitter like we talked about. Matthias, you mentioned with the 381 average of runs in scoring position. Especially as a right-handed hitter, this kind of fills a bunch of needs, like you guys said perfectly. Outside of the thump, with Alonso hitting behind Soto, Alonso was their best situational hitter and run producer. So to be able to replace that now is huge. And it's a good pivot. Obviously, there's risk involved. Like I said, he's a younger player, but with the knee thing, you get worried. But we talked about before we started taping here, the combination of, third base and assuming rotating in the DH role is going to be able to keep him fresh. And, this is a move that the Mets hope if they can get to the playoffs, a guy that can kind of, in the lineup that can carry them and has proven is a clutch player. And another thing that we've heard about, you talked about reuniting with his double play partner in Simeon. Simeon was really brought in here, right? It seems like to cleanse the clubhouse, to be a leader. One thing you keep reading about and hearing about with Bo Bichette is his attitude in the clubhouse, his leadership, his day-to-day being there. Guys love playing with him. So, I think that coupled with, needing to get an impact bat, I think things work out well for the Mets. Like I said, you worried about the knee here, but, change of scenery, change of position, being able to rotate through the DH, it should hopefully make for a very productive player here for, a middle of the order bat that the Mets sorely, sorely needed.
Yeah, and you can probably bat him, considering his success with men in scoring positions past year, you probably bat him third in the lineup, bat him behind Lindor and Soto. I mean, if those guys get on base in front of him, we saw what Pete Alonso was able to do this year with batting behind Soto. I think Bichette is another guy he'd benefit greatly from batting behind Soto. I mean, he really seemed to benefit from playing with Vlad Guerrero Jr. this year. I mean, in the past, he benefited from having, Guerrero, Teoscar Hernandez, Simeon. I think he makes the players around him better, but if he keeps playing around good hitters and hitting the middle of that lineup, I think he's really going to thrive. And also, he's still young. That's the thing, is I feel like people started to count him out a little bit after that 2024 season where he really struggled and was injured. But this year, it felt like he was just consistently hitting. And even when he came back from that hamstring injury in the World Series, he couldn't really run that much, but he was still just constantly hitting. And then he got his big moment. Unfortunately, it was all for naught, but he hit that 3-run homer off Shohei Ohtani, which was a moonshot. It proved that he still had plenty of thump in his bat, despite playing probably not at full strength. So I'd like to see him play, a full season at 100%. And if he opts out, he opts out. But I think if we're talking about just 2026, I think this is a great ad for the roster, and I'm really excited to see what he can do for this team.
Yeah, and Bo Bichette also just fits kind of the archetype of how this team's been built over the last couple of months in this offseason. And Bo Bichette really does not strike out at all as a player. Going back to last season, he struck out just 14.5% of the time. If you go and you look at everybody they've added so far, Jorge Polanco's under 20%. Marcus Simeon is under 20%. Carson Bench, who is supposed to have a big role on this team next season, either as a left fielder or center fielder, he struck out just 17% across all three minor league levels. So you can kind of see what David Stearns is trying to do with this offense, which is kind of like what he did with the Milwaukee Brewers and also kind of like what the Toronto Blue Jays did to get to the World Series, which is build a team that's contact first. You tried the guys like Brandon Nimmo and Jeff McNeil and Pete Alonso, who really over the last 3 years ticked up in strikeouts. So you're trying to reverse that now. Get a guy like Lindor on to lead off the game. Juan Soto gets a walk, and now Bo Bichette comes up with two guys on. So that's kind of what they're moving towards with the stolen bases and the contact-oriented first lineup. And I think Bo Bichette just is another guy that fits that archetype of player.
Yeah, no, agreed. And the point I was just going to make before Matthias talking about the 3-run homer off of Ohtani, he hits elite pitching. You see that. He's able to hit really good pitching. That's something that you need in this game, especially in the middle of the lineup. So, it'll be interesting. I think lineup configuration now is something that's going to be interesting. I don't know how you guys feel. I would think it's going to be Lindor, Soto, Bichette, 1, 2, 3. I was thinking a little bit if there was a world maybe where you wanted to lead Soto off. Lindor, it was not 2024 lead off Lindor last year. He was very peak and valley. He's very peak and valley as an offensive player as it is. But I think now that you signed Bichette, you have someone with real protection now for Soto. I'm thinking as far as that 1, 2, 3 and who's hitting cleanup, whether, Vientos of the world, guess it depend on matchups, things like that. But, your best hitters really hit 1, 2, 3 now anyway. So that seems like that would be just the most obvious way to do it. Obviously, it depends on with Lindor being a switch hitter, if you facing a lefty or righty, that sort of thing. But pretty much every day, you would think that's going to be the top 3 in your lineup going forward.
Yeah, I mean, really, and the other thing that I like here is that you mentioned it's Chris that Stearns is starting to build this team a little bit more like he did with the Brewers. And the other thing the Brewers have is a lot of versatility, and now you're sort of getting to see that a little bit. And all right, Bo Bichette really hasn't played third base a ton, but he's played second, he's played short a lot. Jorge Polanco has played basically all over the infield. And now you have Brett Beatty with an opportunity to sort of become more of a Jeff McNeil type. You'll see Beatty, I'm sure, get some reps at third base. Maybe he starts taking grounders at first. I could see him playing a decent amount at first with a guy like Polanco, who hasn't really played first base much before. Beatty's played the outfield in the minors in the past. And right now, the Mets have an opening in left field. Maybe we see Brett Beatty open the year in left field. I'm sure we'll see him play a decent amount at third base, but you see these guys sort of like how the Brewers have been operating, where they play multiple positions. So I think in addition to the offensive productivity you're gaining here, it also adds a layer of versatility that I think will really help the team.
It also helps that a lot of these players are, coming into the season with an injury-prone past. If Bo Bichette gets hurt, now you can put Brett Beatty back at third and you're okay. Jorge Polanco gets injured at second base or first base, you could slot, Bo Bichette there. Same with Marcus Semien. So that versatility will definitely help. And then even going back to the lineup construction, Sal, I think this is something that Carlos Mendoza is going to have a lot of fun with next year. You could bat Francisco Lindor leadoff where he's been comfortable, or you could put Juan Soto first and then have Francisco Lindor batting second. I think those two are pretty interchangeable. And then maybe you're facing a tough lefty. Maybe you want Bo Bichette to bat leadoff. Maybe you want him to just rip a single and start the game off. So it's going to be a lot of fun. I think that there's still some work to be done, obviously, with maybe adding an outfielder, maybe not giving Brett Beatty that left field job, maybe trading for still a Luis Robert. So it's still a lot to be seen with the offense and, the rotation. So it's January 16th. Hopefully, by the time February starts, we can do a show and get a real look at the 1 through 9. But as of now, I've continued to say this, and we wrote a piece about this for the website. It's a lot better than people think looking up and down the lineup. And the addition of Bo Bichette just really adds that star-studded right-handed bat that they were missing ever since Alonso walked away.
Yeah, thinking about trades now, and I want to get to Vientos and Beatty here in a second, because my next question would be, which one of them are going to stay? Because I do think one of those guys is going to go probably for an arm, I would think. But more so to that, I'm just thinking lineup-wise, there's a guy in Minnesota who plays center field that an outfield of Carson Bench, Byron Buxton, and Juan Soto would look pretty good. And they have some, prospect capital to do something like that. Again, I know you signed Bichette now, talking about the lineups, lengthen out a bit, with that. But if you could bring in an established bat like that and someone that you can man center field, might help Benj a lot too, to not have the pressure if he does have to be the everyday center fielder, to kind of get his feet wet a little bit. Because I don't know how much fans are going to want Tyrone Taylor playing center field every day once the season starts, but just kind of a name that I'm thinking about. And in general now, the Bichette signing says to me that they can now push to use, when we talked about it in our last episode, using that prospect capital to add another bat, realistically probably adding an arm or two. I just think that this now gives them a lot more flexibility to do more with this roster that they sorely, sorely needed.
Yeah, and I think what it's going to come down to is who are they trading for? Because realistically, I don't think I see them trading for a bat. I think if they're going to get another bat, another outfielder, it'll come on the free agent market. Apparently, they're still in on Cody Bellinger, which I mean, look, I don't think they should give him 7 years. I don't think they should give him necessarily the 30+ million AAV that he's looking for, but I think Bellinger could be a solid addition if he's not forced to be the guy in the lineup. If he's batting lower in the lineup, I think he'll be perfectly fine. He's still a solid defender. But I think if they're trading for an arm, if they're trading for more of like a 2 or a 3 type, then I see Vientos going. If they're really upping the ante trying to get a guy like Tarek Skubal, then Beatty probably goes. But realistically, I think at least one of them gets dealt. If they're going for the Freddie Peralta route, I could see the Brewers accepting Vientos as part of the deal. But really, I think the only guy I really see Beatty being included over Vientos in a trade for is probably Skubal. Or in the off chance they are able to trade for Joe Ryan in a deal that also includes Byron Buxton, which I still don't see great. Buxton getting moved this offseason. That'd be a perfect package.
Yeah.
But yeah, one of these guys has to get moved. And preferably it's for an arm, because they still really, really need at least another arm in the rotation.
If I had to choose between which one to trade, I think Mark Vientos leaving makes the most sense. One, he doesn't have positional versatility like Brett Beatty does. And two, he's out of minor league options. So if you're putting him on the major league roster, he's there and he's there to stay. And it's kind of just a black hole when you're looking at your 25-man, 26-man roster. So if I had to choose, I would trade Mark Vientos. And then Byron Buxton. I mean, I've been wanting to trade for Byron Buxton for the last 3 seasons now as a Mets fan, but as Matthias alluded to, I don't think it's going to happen. He's got the no trade clause. He wants to stay. I don't think the Minnesota Twins, who just changed ownership, want to move their superstar because they want people to be in the building. So if he's available and he wants to come to New York and he wants to move his family there, I mean, absolutely. I'll trade myself. I'll go live in Minnesota. But outside of that, I would probably trade Mark Vientos. And honestly, I don't even think Mark Vientos is more valued than Brett Beatty on the market. I think if you go to a team like the Tigers, or if you go to a team like Pittsburgh, or even the Marlins, when you were talking about trading for a Sandy Alcantara or an Edward Cabrera who just got moved, they want Brett Beatty. It's just the better profile with the underlying metrics. Like we've been saying all podcasts long and all season long, he can play third base, left field, second base. We're talking about maybe playing first base as well. So I think Brett Beatty overall is just the more valued player. And if you could move him, I don't even think Joe Ryan's the name because they want to hold on to him. I think it'd be more like Pablo Lopez and eating that contract from the Twins, or maybe trading for a guy like Mitch Keller, who wasn't moved at the deadline, but maybe Pittsburgh's ready to move on from him in the offseason.
And to your point about Buxton real quick, that there were talks that apparently the Braves approached the Twins about Buxton, and Buxton is an Atlanta area guy, and he said even for the Braves, he wouldn't waive his no trade clause. So I think that really says that he does want to keep himself and his family in Minnesota. But I think I could see, I mean, it's weird. We've seen almost nothing about Pablo Lopez this offseason when he's a pretty solid pitcher, just he has a bit more salary to him than Ryan. But, that's another guy I'd consider. But I feel like some team would bite on Vientos just because he's had he had that 2024 season, which was much stronger than anything Beatty has ever done. So maybe some team, that's why I picture Milwaukee. Milwaukee did this with Andrew Vaughn this year, and they were able to unlock something out of him. So I could see a team like Milwaukee taking a flyer on him. But Beatty, I agree. Beatty has the versatility. He played much better this year. I definitely see why he would be the more valued guy on the market.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like you said about Vientos, he's got the track record now from 2024 and in that postseason too, right? Team saw that and obviously would want to take a chance. So I guess it all depends on package preference sort of deal. But I do think one of these two guys is getting dealt for an arm. I completely agree with that. Buxton at this point would just be a luxury to have to just kind of round out your outfield there. And like I said, take pressure off a bench to be able to just stick them in left field and go from there. But listen, if the Mets can still be in on Bellinger, if he, like you said, if he's sitting in the lower third of that order and playing left field for you, and also, he hasn't done it in a while, but he can play first base. He was a Gold Glove first baseman at one point. If they ever had an injury there or needed to do that. So I don't think that would be a bad thing either. Again, just I don't think the Mets have given him 7 years or anything, like that. So, if they can get him on a shorter term deal, for him not to be the guy, I think that would help as well. But, it's interesting. The Bichette thing really, in a lot of ways, like I said, helps them, and especially more than anything now, it should be to get more pitching because outside of the rotation, which we've talked about, same thing with the bullpen too. I keep going to a guy like Josh Hader. Maybe they can try to trade him away from Houston, take some of that contract on. I just don't feel comfortable with the guys they have in the bullpen right now going forward too, especially with Devin Williams as the closer. That's something they're still going to have to address, but hopefully Stearns can kind of find those margin arms like he's done in the past, and that can kind of help. But, I do think that one of these two, Beatty or Vientos to the like, and whatever other prospect capital they have to do, depending on what they can get, I think they're going to trade for an arm. They kind of don't have a choice. It's also, go ahead.
As to say, you mentioned Hader, and that's a name that's popped in my head earlier this offseason because the Astros are kind of in an awkward place where they probably can't quite compete with the Mariners, but they're also not like bad enough where you're considering them like completely out of the postseason picture. Sure. But Hader does have a bigger contract. It's just now that I think about it, I don't know if the Mets have a contract like Haters that they could sort of give up to slightly offset the salaries, but that is a guy I have thought about. I don't see him getting moved necessarily. I don't think the Mets would go after him, but I think it also could go back to, say if the Mets do link up with the Brewers for a trade, you try to get like Trevor McGill in addition to Freddie Peralta.
Sure.
I know the Mets, I agree with you. I think the Mets still need to add to the bullpen in addition to the rotation. So they still have a lot of work to do even after getting Bichette, but this is a nice, it's one of the better moves I feel like they've made this offseason. The fans have clamored for action. They got close to it with Kyle Tucker, but this is actually a move that I think benefits the team more than any other move they made this offseason.
Cody Bellinger is also an interesting one, Sal, because it kind of seems to me like Bellinger wants the years, and that's what's been the holdup. We know that the Yankees have a 5-year, $30 million AAV offer on the table, and they're pretty much just standing pat saying, this is our deal. If you can beat it, and if you want to go somewhere else, go somewhere else. But you can always come back here. So unless the Mets give him kind of like the Bo Bichette deal where they give him a 3-year, $40 million AAV, which I don't really recommend doing.
I don't see it happening.
Yeah, they could. I don't think Bellinger is going to be a New York Met. And he kind of fits that type of player we were talking about earlier. He struck out just 13% of the time last year. But the thing that worries me about Bellinger is if you go and you look at the hard hit rate, even though the home runs were there last year, he only hit the ball 38% of the time hard, which is, like a 90 mile an hour or harder exit velocity. So I don't know if that's going to play in Citi Field where, maybe he can get away with that at Yankee Stadium, pulling the ball to right field.
Also, he's taken those short-term deals plenty in the past. I mean, he took the 1-year prove-it deal with the Cubs after the Dodgers non-tendered him. Then he took the 3-year deal with opt-outs after that. And now I honestly can't blame him for wanting those long-term deals now. So I don't see him taking another short-term offer from anyone. That honestly, I see why he wants a 7 or 8-year deal. I just don't think he's necessarily worth it. We're talking about a guy who is going to be 31 this year. And if he were still playing at an MVP caliber level, it'd be one thing, but he's never going to be an MVP again, I don't think. I mean, you can come back to this, at the end of the year if he wins MVP, like magically, but I mean, respectfully, he's a good player. He's a solid player on both sides of the ball, but he is not a guy that I think is worth giving up a 7 or 8-year contract for.
Yeah, completely agree. It would have to be a short-term deal thing, like you just did with Bichette. But like you guys said, I don't think that's happening. It seems like they're holding out as long as they can to get a multi-year deal. So we'll see. Listen, the longer they wait, things can change. But I don't really see it's more if they could do that as a luxury to extend everything out, sure. But we'll see. I keep going back to Bichette and the fact that he turned down a 7-year deal with the Phillies, with the way his knee is and everything else, and the lockout looming next year. I would think guys want the years. They always seem to, talking about Bellinger here, right? He wants the years. So I was very surprised to hear that happen, but $46 million a year or whatever it is that the Mets paying him, it's a lot of money to turn down too, I guess.
And what I like here is that everyone has always asked, what is David Stern's plan this offseason? And he had a pivot plan if they lost out on Tucker. And the fact that, the Phillies gave Bichette an offer that he wanted, 7 years, $200 million. And the Mets came in, were like, all right, here's 3/126 with opt-outs. Like, this is our offer, and he took it. I mean, I think that says a lot about that the front office doesn't want this year to just be like an awkward punt year. Like, they want to compete as hard as it might be to compete with the Dodgers. I mean, they're putting together a lineup they're trying to put together a roster that can at least get to the postseason and try to give them a chance. So I mean, it's good to see them at least still trying to be aggressive.
Yeah, and to your point, you're not out winning the Dodgers. That's not happening. No one in the National League is.
I don't know if anyone in the major leagues.
No, so you push to win it. In my opinion, you push to win what should be a weaker division than it has been in the past. Hopefully, around 83 wins got teams in the playoffs last year. So if you can win 83 to 87, 88 games, that should put you in a position to either be probably in it for the division or at least a wild card spot, and you just have to get in. That's all they have to do is get in. Don't, again, if they start going tit for tat and trying to outwin the Dodgers, they're never not going to win any games because nobody's going to do that. But if they could play their game, understand what's going to get them in the postseason, and know that runs happen that way, then they could be in good shape. It's going to just be so interesting because I don't know if we've had turnover on a roster like this for the Mets. I can't remember like this, large of a core being turned over, and then still expecting and trying to compete, sort of thing, without a rebuild. It's going to be really interesting. It feels like you're going to a different school or something. You don't know anyone. You got to make new friends, even as fans. We don't know a lot of these guys, but hopefully it's for the best, man. It's this is a good start though. Like you guys said, there was a pivot plan in place, obviously, and it worked. They got a quality bat and someone that seems to be a real gamer and comes up big in big spots.
Yeah, and I'll say two things about David Stearns as well, because I know the fan base, obviously, we're having a tumultuous offseason, and maybe the feelings aren't the greatest towards David Stearns. And I'll say this. One, he is one of the best talent evaluators in the entire sport of baseball, and I genuinely believe that. And I think Matthias, a couple of podcasts ago, mentioned the Christian Yelich trade.
Mm-hmm.
And look at those top four, out of 100 prospects he traded from the Brewers for Christian Yelich. I don't think anybody normal outside of us, because we're baseball nerds, could name any of them, unlike me, who remembers Isan Diaz hitting a home run for the Marlins off Jacob deGrom with his dad in the stands. But
Lewis Brinson,
Brinson,
he was the headliner.
He's playing in Mexico now.
Who was that pitcher as well? It was
I think it was Jordan Yamamoto.
Was it Jordan Yamamoto?
Yep, he was also in that deal from the Brewers. But he is a great talent evaluator, and if there's going to be a move to be made, like, look at what they did trading Jesus Baez to the Cardinals for Ryan Helsley. That was a top prospect in the Mets system, and now we'll have to sit and wait and see if he becomes anything. But a lot of these guys that we're signing, are David Stearns is signing, not we, is on 3-year contracts. Yep. So I think when you look at how they're operating this offseason, you're waiting for Carson Bench, you're waiting for Jacob Reimer, you're waiting for AJ Ewing and Mitch Voigt to come up because he believes in these guys that are in the system and that he's drafting. And on top of that, I think he's really put in a tough position because of the Francisco Lindor contract. I mean, you've got an aging shortstop who is one of the best players in all of baseball. And despite him not maybe thinking they're with the Dodgers or they're going to give out those long-term contracts, he's still going out there and using Steve Cohen's money to go get a guy like Bo Bichette or try and go get a guy like Kyle Tucker. So with all of these things that are thrown up against David Stearns and him standing against the wall with these aging superstars, and do I trade for Tarek Skubal from my loaded farm system? I think he's actually done a fantastic job. They got to the NLCS one year. They were 1 win away from making the playoffs last year off of a historic collapse that I think every single starting pitcher got injured last season. So I think we should all just be patient. We should all wait for this season and just try and enjoy it, because who knows what's going to happen in 2027.
Yeah, well, Stearns should take a lot of flack from last year because he did not address the starting staff at all. He just did what he did the year before and hoped he bought low and got big, and it didn't happen. But hey, grace periods happen. It gave him an opportunity to blow this core up, which I think he wanted to do. So it gave him a chance to, an excuse to, and it's going to have his thumbprints all over now, his handprints all over it. This is a really good start. There's a lot more they need to do. But the lineup in a sense now can take a breath. They got that bat that they wanted, and Met fans should be happy. Bichette is a good player. They have somebody to hit behind, a real hitter to hit behind Soto, and hopefully they keep making moves from here until spring. But I think that's going to wrap it up from here. A happy podcast for once for this off season, so we'll take that. Hopefully more to come between now and then. But as always, everybody, let's go Mets.